individual actions that can help stave off a surge in coronavirus cases.
A large segment of our population has really permanently changed their behavior.
Some businesses welcome back customers, while others decide it's still too soon.
There's no way to put a drink down or a plate of food down on your table while maintaining that 6-foot distance.
Plus, what businesses and employers are liable for as they reopen their doors.
They don't want to be subject to a lawsuit because they didn't exercise reasonable precaution.
Hello and welcome to Arizona 360. I'm Lorraine Rivera. Thanks for joining us. Arizona's stay-at-home order came to an end this week after more than 6 weeks in effect. Governor Ducey also gave more businesses the green light to reopen. Later, we'll show you what that looks like for some. But first, with coronavirus cases still climbing, we begin with a discussion about what individuals can do to protect themselves, especially as more make the decision to get out of the house. Our insight comes from University of Arizona virologist Felicia Goodman. We're about 8 weeks or so into this pandemic. There have been stay-at-home orders and other measures that people have taken to minimize the spread of COVID-19. Are we as a society where you'd like to be at this point?
From a public health and scientific perspective, no. What we would like to see before we begin reopening the country or the state would be a sustained drop in the number of cases over about a 2-week period. And we're not there yet. Cases in Arizona continue to rise in particular. And so that's very concerning now that we're going to emerge really in the midst of the pandemic versus a time when we're on the other side of the curve and the numbers of cases and deaths are beginning to drop.
Why, after the stay-at-home orders and social distancing, have the numbers not been where you'd like to see them at this point?
It really comes down to compliance. And so maybe 50% of the state is doing a very good job with the stay-at-home and social distancing, but there are always those that don't think the virus is a big deal to them or that they're not susceptible. And so there is continued interaction that is resulting in new cases every day.
As certain segments of society, industries begin to reopen their doors, there are some best practices that we're being encouraged to follow, things from the Centers for Disease Control, like face masks. What are some of the things that we need to consider? Because there are still those who won't wear one or don't think they need to because they're not at risk.
Right, and this is going to be the battle and the problem going forward. The real risk in not adhering to social distancing or the use of masks is going to be that this month of staying at home is going to all be for naught, and we're going to lose the gains that we've made during this month. And so going forward and thinking about going into life, I think one thing that encourages me is that a large segment of our population has really permanently changed their behavior. And so whether the state officially opens or not, people are still going to sort of really practice strong social distancing that's going to help us maintain our gains. And what I'll be doing and advise people I know to do is to really keep very diligent attention to the social distancing, keeping 6 feet distance between you and other people when you're out. And hand washing is really 98% of our battle against this virus. It's an envelope virus. It's very susceptible to soaps and detergents, and it really can't travel long distances between people to transmit if people aren't coughing or sneezing. And so that 6-foot distance is really adequate to protect people. The masks give us an extra layer of protection in reducing the ability of the virus or the distance the virus can shed to even less than that 6-foot distance.
Given that we are here in the summer months, does that give you some hope that that heat will help tamp down this virus?
It may help a lot, but a seasonality component to this pandemic has not yet been observed. So it's not going to give us a lot of safety. And I think the real worry, though, that we have to be attuned to is come fall, whether the virus ramps up to a greater level or not, what's really going to be dangerous is that it's going to be coupled with a flu season. And so COVID-19 plus flu, either together or in successive infections, is going to present a really dangerous situation.
Is everyone still considered vulnerable, or are there age groups that are more susceptible than others?
Certainly the group at highest susceptibility for infection is the elderly above the age of 80, but anyone above the age of 65, especially those with pre-existing conditions, have greater vulnerability to the infection. However, what we're beginning to see is that at lower risk is really everybody, even young children, which we used to think were not very susceptible, to people in the 20 to 50-year-old age range also can get severe disease. It just happens at a lower incidence than in the elderly population or people who are immunocompromised or have other pre-existing conditions that make them more susceptible to a respiratory virus.
Okay, Dr. Felicia Goodrum, a virologist with the University of Arizona. Thanks for your time.
Thanks, Lorraine.
The pandemic and resulting restrictions have inflicted unprecedented damage to the economy. In Arizona, for the second week of May, continued unemployment claims approached 300,000. Payouts from the Department of Economic Security totaled over $160 million. For insight into the setbacks and what the road to recovery may look like, we turn to U of A economist George Hammond.
The pandemic is having big impacts, particularly in travel and tourism, trade, retail trade, particularly even in healthcare. I think that was something that a lot of us didn't really see coming, and also impacts on hair and nail salons and childcare as well.
Those are the sectors that have been perhaps negatively impacted. Are there any that have managed to do well or remain steady during this?
Well, this is a really widespread impact. So there aren't a lot of sectors that have really benefited from it or seen increased activities. And the ones that have are the ones that you might guess. So grocery stores and pharmacies, warehouses, online activity has seen some increases. But, if we look at card-based transactions, overall consumer spending, which would include those online purchases, are down significantly compared to where we were before the outbreak.
The 500,000 or so Arizonans who have lost their jobs, any data yet of how many have actually applied for unemployment, are receiving it, and perhaps are using some of that money to pump back into the state's economy?
These are things that are designed to help people keep their lives together as much as possible while they're sheltering in place and social distancing. So they will help people buy groceries, pay utilities, and pay rent as much as they can. But they're not really going to boost economic activity until we have enough control of the outbreak that people feel that they can return to more normal levels of economic activity. So they feel they can gather in groups in restaurants and movie theaters and at stores in a way that's more similar to the pre-outbreak activity.
This unemployment funding, in some cases, extends for 39 weeks. Is that the timeline that you're looking at as an economist to when you'll start to see some activity again?
Well, you want to keep in mind that the expanded funding for unemployment insurance benefits, there's an additional weekly benefit through the CARES Act of $600 per week, in addition to the maximum in Arizona that's $240 per week. But that $600 increment ends at the end of July. The benefits at the lower level are extended through the 39-week period. So, I think we will need additional support at least through that period. I think that the Arizona economy is going to recover gradually over the next couple of years. I think we'll get back to the levels that we saw in late 2019. Sometime in 2022. So it is going to take time for us to repair the damage.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because one of the studies that the University of Arizona Eller College of Management lists currently on its website talks about Arizona's recovery as solid coming out of this pandemic. What leads you to say that at this point?
Yeah, I do think that the recovery is going to be solid. Once, we get control over the outbreak, we are going to see activity recover at fairly rapid rates. So we'll see these rapid growth rates in the overall economy, rapid job growth. But it's important to keep in mind that that's rapid growth off a very low level. So we're going to see the growth rates that are going to look pretty eye-popping, but it will take time to get the level of economic activity back to where it was before the outbreak. I think it's also important to keep in mind that the Arizona economy was very strong before the outbreak struck. Arizona was generating jobs at roughly double the national rate. So the Arizona economy was in good shape before the outbreak. And I think the longer term prospects are good for Arizona.
Okay, Dr. George Hammond from the University of Arizona Eller College of Management. Thanks for your analysis.
Thank you.
Restaurants and gyms joined the growing list of businesses allowed to open their doors this week. In doing so, owners must now navigate a new normal that prioritizes safety from an invisible threat. Some have decided it's still too soon. Tony Paniagua and photojournalist John DeSoto have more.
Like millions of business owners across the country, Julieta Mungaray recently had a heart-to-heart conversation with her employees and family. Reopen Eclipse Cut Salon in Southwest Tucson when it was legal to do so, or stay closed due to ongoing threats from COVID-19. In the end, they decided to welcome back their customers.
It's very hard because you want to be supportive with the community, you want to keep everybody safe, you want our stylists to be safe. I mean, I want my girls to be safe, but it's hard.
And her decision requires new policies. All employees have to wear masks and gloves, and the salon is also requiring masks for customers and other guests. Appointments are spaced apart to allow for sanitizing between clients, and some furniture has been removed from the waiting area to allow for social distancing. It's part of a new and difficult reality, but Mungaray is happy to be working. She and her husband have 5 children to support. Also, monthly expenses like rent, insurance, payroll, and supplies total thousands of dollars.
If I had enough, finance to say, you know what, I can keep the shop closed and I can still pay my girls, I would have done it a little bit longer. But in reality, I'm not able to. And the girls need to work, I need to work. It's just all of us need to work to support our families.
A few miles away, at American Eat Company, the owners and tenants were busy Tuesday morning preparing for their opening the next day.
Man, we're going to give it a shot and see how the customer response is.
Sanitizing has intensified throughout the space. Splash shields are being installed to help protect against sneezing and coughs. And new signage will remind people to stay 6 feet away.
We're trying to mitigate some of those cross-contamination issues that you may come across.
Of the 9 businesses in this building, all agreed that workers will wear masks, although customers get to choose if they will also use one. One day after reopening, on Thursday, a staff member also checks employees' temperatures. Word is spreading about the back-to-business efforts here, and at least some diners are gradually returning.
I'm actually really excited to be here today. The first time in a long time to have a sit-down meal versus cooking at home all the time, every time. So I'm really excited about it.
We're going to collaborate as a whole here and brainstorm, but I do believe restaurants, the way of restaurants will be different, and we're going to adapt. We have to. People will still want to eat, and we still want to serve people, so just differently.
Edessa Valencia is only 21 years old, but she's already managing one of the businesses here.
I am nervous. It is a lot to take in at once. As a manager, you're always learning. There's always something new coming up. We're going to be clean, of course. We're going to feel safe. I just want the customers to feel welcome and know that they can still come get what they love here at Café con Leche.
Charmaine Williams loves to get her nails done, and she's glad her go-to location has reopened.
I've been coming here for a while, so I'm extremely excited.
She was one of several customers at Casa de Nails in the city of South Tucson. Owners are waiting on new splash shields and will close some of the stations to help create space. Workers will wear masks. The coronavirus is a persistent concern.
I hope we come up with a cure and we're back to normal, or the temporary new normal will go away soon.
I feel like as long as everybody follows safety rules and guidelines and just stays safe and washes their hands and wears their masks and continue to practice the social distancing, I think we'll be good.
Even though some businesses are banking on recommended guidelines, other owners don't feel quite ready yet. Tucson, Arizona is a coalition of hundreds of merchants who decided not to reopen out of concern it could put their customers and staff at risk. La Cocina in downtown Tucson signed on to that list.
It is emotional, We want nothing more than to come back to work and be able to serve our community and feed people healthy, nutritious food and listen to music on the stage, support our musicians. But right now we just feel like it's too soon.
Even the restaurant's popular outdoor seating area doesn't put manager Allie Barron at ease.
If a server is bringing a plate of food to your table or taking your order, there's no way to put a drink down or a plate of food down on your table while maintaining that 6-foot distance. Also, many kitchens, the staff is working in really tight quarters. So you have your kitchen line, and being able to maintain that 6-foot distance between staff members in most situations is almost impossible.
Barron says the decision to remain closed has been incorrectly interpreted by some people as politically motivated. In actuality, La Cocina says some workers and customers are not ready to return. There are also logistical hurdles like restocking food supplies. Plus, the restaurant is already hurting because of the closure during some of the best weeks of the year. Bringing back staff in the upcoming slow summer months may end up costing them more than waiting to reopen.
We do have some cleaning projects going on. We're really working on sprucing up the place, doing painting, and making sure that when we are ready to open, it will be safe and fresh and clean for everybody.
La Cocina is not criticizing businesses that choose to open, and the ones we visited say nothing derogatory about places like La Cocina. Whether they open or not, all owners and managers we spoke to say their decisions were not taken lightly because running a business has multiple facets. The coronavirus, they say, is just the latest one to contend with.
Never imagined this in a million years. Yeah, it's been one heck of a ride.
We're going to work through this, and hopefully there won't be a second wave of this, and we're just going to do the best we can. Obviously, this was devastating to our economy.
That was Tony Paniagua reporting. For a deeper dive into how the region's business landscape has changed during the pandemic, I'm joined by Amber Smith, president of the Tucson Metro Chamber. Amber, thanks for your time today.
Thank you.
Amber, I know this has been going on for about 6 to 8 weeks. What is your sense on what sorts of challenges the business community will be facing in the days and weeks ahead?
Well, we are leading into our slow time of season, so it really just depends on the industry. Restaurants now have the authority to be able to open, but there are many strict guidelines as well that might hinder their ability to do that. Plus, there's still concerns out there as to, is it really safe?
You're hearing from the governor, but then you also hear from Pima County and the mayor with their own set of recommendations.
The differences in rules has certainly negatively impacted businesses. It's creating uncertainty. What can I do? How can I operate? If I do this, will I get in trouble with this other entity? And it's very problematic. We have consistently said there must be one set of rules and guidelines for ease. So it's really just muddying the waters.
Early on, the feds announced there would be stimulus dollars coming this direction. And we heard from the Arizona Chamber of Commerce and Industry recently about the millions that came in. Locally, did the dollars actually make their way to Arizona businesses here in Pima County?
They are starting to. Absolutely. The payroll protection plan certainly has been disseminated. We did a survey of our members. About 30% who applied did receive those funds that first round. I'm certain that more received it since the second round as well. And then the city and the county have funds too. And they are creating their strategies to be able to get that into the community in the highest and best use.
I think it's fair to say that in some circles, this has become a political, polarizing issue. Here in this region, we have Tucson, Arizona, or in the state of Arizona, I should say. Would you say that that has pitted businesses apart from those who are ready to reopen and others who say, you know what, I'm not prepared to do this just yet?
I would absolutely say that. And it's been disappointing to watch. And I'm not taking a stance whether or not we should or should not open. But what I don't like to see is that those businesses that made that choice, that is allowed by our government representatives, they are now being judged by others, which absolutely divides the community.
What is your word of advice or caution to those that are really struggling with, as you said, being judged?
Well, communications. I think it's really important to fully and clearly articulate what plans you have in place for the health and safety of the employees as well as the customers. What efforts do you have? Is everyone wearing gloves? Is everyone wearing masks? What are your processes and protocols in place to eliminate and reduce those touch points, to achieve appropriate social distancing requirements? It's really important that consumers know that when they walk into a business, they can clearly see that every reasonable accommodation has been made to make them safe.
Amber, you've got your ear to the ground in the business community, but also with families and schools. What's being left out of this discussion right now as Arizona begins to reopen?
Childcare. So Arizona is open. However, what do those parents do whose children are still at home when normally they would be in school? What do they do when there aren't any summer camps? This is a critical issue that we must talk about more, is how do we achieve social distancing and safety and be able to have childcare? What does that look like?
All right, putting things into perspective for us, Amber Smith from the Tucson Metro Chamber. Thanks for your insight today.
Thanks, Lorraine.
On the issue of safety, as companies and institutions try to prevent public spaces from becoming hotspots for the coronavirus, some have adopted methods like requiring face masks or temperature checks. It raises questions about whether customers or workers can refuse and who gets the final say. We got clarification from Tara Sklar, an expert in health law and policy with the U of A College of Law. As businesses reopen, what sorts of things can they require of customers and employees before entering back into a business or workplace?
So I think what's helpful to keep in mind is what is a reasonable standard of care for businesses before we had the pandemic? What was expected of them? And in that case, they would be expected to, if someone was hurt or injured on their property, then someone would be able to file a negligence suit. And if it was found that the injury or illness happened because of that business, then they would be liable for damages with the CDC guidances, with the OSHA guidances, in terms of physical distance, 6 feet apart, wearing masks and gloves. These are all things that would be a reasonable standard of care that an employer could insist on having their employees and customers do before they walk into that place of business, whether it's a restaurant or a nail salon or whatever it might be.
Lately, we're hearing things about temperature checks or perhaps testing for COVID-19 or antibodies. Are those pushing any sort of legal boundaries for someone to request that of someone when many of us believe we have a reasonable right to privacy in that area?
I think it's important that you could still balance these two. You could certainly do those things such as temperature checks and screenings in a private way where you're not exposing an individual information out more than absolutely necessary to protect others. I think that there's also ways of triaging your employees and customers. Maybe not everybody has to be subject to the same level of testing, whether it's the temperature checks or self-reporting that you could do in this circumstance. So let's say it's someone that has less contact with the public, they're not out there as much as others, then they may not be required to have as much screening as somebody else. But given that what we do know about this virus, and we do know it disproportionately impacts an elderly population and those that have chronic underlying conditions, I would say it would be more proactive to really address those individuals first when we do have limited resources in the testing and screening areas than for the entire workforce.
You know, we're hearing stories about people worry that it's it's potentially bridging on their individual rights, and they're uncomfortable sharing too much information. Granted, this is something none of us have ever experienced, given that we're in a pandemic now, but it is fair for the average citizen to question things and then perhaps proceed cautiously because they may not know what to expect in the workplace or at a business.
Right. I mean, it might be helpful at this point to distinguish between what an employee's rights might be from a customer or patron's rights. So let's say your employer says, I expect you to wear a face mask and gloves, or various things that the CDC has advised us will help protect us with limiting transmission of the coronavirus. So an employee, should they then get the coronavirus, they wouldn't be able to sue the employer in that circumstance. They would fall under a workers' compensation fund. But the interesting issue there, which is a gray area, is that typically a workers' compensation fund excludes diseases that are prevalent in the general population. And that's just a very gray area right now. And there could be some exceptions for those that are healthcare workers or work in the lab, or maybe even cashiers at grocery stores that have a really high volume of seeing members of the public, that maybe they could still qualify for workers' compensation. But if not, then they may bring suit the same way that a customer or patron would, where they would say, you know, I've been exposed to this disease because you as an employer, as a business, failed to properly protect me at the bowling alley, at the restaurant, at the nail salon. And I think that's what employers are really afraid and trying to balance right now, is how to protect their employees, how to protect the customers, how to, and not be potentially subject to liability. So I think it's important to think about this from an employer's perspective, of where they don't want to be subject to a lawsuit because they didn't exercise reasonable precaution.
You've talked about all this gray area, and given that there are so many unknowns, what is your advice or your recommendation to the average citizen who's watching this and wondering, what do we do now, given that we never experienced this sort of thing before?
There's all this ambiguity about the legal liability issue right now. And there are calls by Senate Majority Mitch McConnell and the Chamber of Commerce to say, we need to have immunity, we need to have safe harbors. There's going to be a pandemic of lawsuits as a result of this. And I just want to acknowledge that it's very hard to prove a lawsuit in this area. It'd be very hard to show that you got the virus at that business on that day because that employer didn't exercise reasonable, prudent care. So I think it's important to think that if that does get stripped away and there is immunity, then businesses may not act as prudently as they otherwise would to protect the public. So to keep that in mind regarding potential liability and immunity and what that means for you as a member of the public.
Okay, Tara Sklar from the University of Arizona College of Law. Thanks for your insight.
Oh, thank you so much.
That's all for now. Thanks for joining us. To get in touch, visit us on social media or send an email to Arizona360@azpm.org and let us know what you think. We'll see you next week.